Dan Miller with me. Dan, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Aaron. How are you? Sorry about that, but kicked the microphone
That's
down.
Okay. That's okay.
It's a Monday morning, I guess.
It is Monday after all. You're Kaleb Roebuck with us as well. Kaleb, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great, Aaron.
How was the weekend?
Well, mine was pretty good, too.
Building rural wealth. What is a business valuation and when should it be done? So when we're talking about business valuation, which a lot of people in our area have small businesses, what's it worth? It's an important question to ask, an important piece of information. But you're not talking about bookkeeping here, Dan. We're talking about what's the business worth overall, right?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, business valuation, it's a process to determine the economic value of a company. I mean, literally. And you think about what all goes into that. There's so many factors that go into it. I mean, it's not exactly like valuing a house, but on the other hand, because there's so many more factors that go into. And, but it's also not a guess, and unfortunately, we do talk to a lot of different people in businesses and stuff, and they think, oh, it's worth about this much. Well, the idea with a business valuation is to look at the financials, the assets, the industry, comparisons, the earnings potential, and the other thing that's interesting about business valuations is there are a lot of different approaches that you can take that all are kind of dependent upon what you're wanting to do with the business valuation. There's the income approach, which is, based on expected cash flows. In other words, what is the earnings potential and the income potential? The market approach, this is where, probably a little more similar to like appraising a house where, what did another house sell for? Well, this would be what did another similar business sell for? That'd be the market approach. And then the asset approach is looking at what the business owns versus owes. In other words, what's kind of the balance sheet net worth.
Yeah. So when should an evaluation be done, Kaleb?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, a lot of times it kind of depends, like Dan said, what is your purpose of the valuation? But it can be a lot of things in kind of the life cycle of the business. But, one of them is securing financing or investment. For those, a lot of times lenders, investors may require it. And that might be something business owners are doing now, like a balance sheet and stuff too. So that's somewhat of a valuation. But other ones would be selling a business or bringing in partners. Again, you want a fair number on the table for selling that business or bringing in a partner. Succession and retirement planning. If the business is your retirement nest egg, you need to know what that is and plan accordingly.
That's a big one, I would think.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Again, in small businesses around here and what Dan's talking about, that's a big part of how do you do that and fit that in. Tax and estate planning. Sometimes the IRS requires formal valuations for business and gifting strategies and depending on the corporate structure. Mergers and acquisitions. If you're going to buy another business or, again, sell yours, you need to know what that is. Or if you're buying a business, you need to kind of know what is that relative value of that business versus yours. Legal disputes, again, in small businesses, there can be legal disputes, whether it be divorce, partnership disagreements, or shareholder issues. Again, those require some sort of valuation on the business to split and dissolve those assets. And then regular checkups, even without major events, evaluation, every few years can be a very key financial health checkup. Again, so what is. And many folks only think about valuation when they're ready to sell, like Dan mentioned, kind of when they're within a year or so. But honestly, doing one earlier, and this is part of Dan's training and stuff too, which he'll touch on, but it can actually help strengthen the business. If you know what the valuation of your business is, if you know where their strengths and weaknesses, that actually helps strengthen your business along the way, whether you're getting ready for some of these events or, again, just running the operation day to day.
So what's the biggest risk of not knowing what your business is worth?
Well, I think it goes back to what I said about building that valuation on a number that's you don't really know. In other words, you're plotting out all your future based on, well, I think I'm worth this.
Right.
I think that I can sell it for this in the future. I think that is one of the biggest risks. You may go your whole working career and just know that because you read somewhere that somebody sold a business for 3 times EBITDA or earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, or this guy sold it for 6 times EBITDA or whatever, that you should be able to do yours too. Well, you don't know. There might have been, you don't know the factors behind that.
Right.
So overestimating is a big one. On the other side of that, on the flip side is oftentimes we see people will underestimate the value of their business. working with a gentleman right now that I feel very confident he's underestimating the value of his business. And so, I think there's more value there than what they, can give them credit. They're giving themselves credit for.
Mm-hmm. Is there a common thing you see crop up with business valuations, Caleb?
Yeah, definitely. And Dan kind of mentioned it. The biggest one is often owners wait till kind of that edge. Waiting to kind of figure that out. How do I want to exit it? Because a lot of times it's not, on their terms. It could be a health event or something now,
right.
Or they just age out of being able to do the business where they physically can't do it anymore or something like that too. But by that time, there's very little, strengthening you can do the business. Again, if you're a key person in that business and can't work it as hard, that might affect the valuation. And sometimes people are just shocked to find out what that number actually is when they've done it. Again, if they've kind of used rule of the thumbs and stuff too,
mm-hmm.
but then when they apply their actually own numbers, they can be shocked by what that actually number is, good or bad. So we've seen that both ways. And getting clarity, early can, oftentimes avoid, that give you that time and space to make better decisions and kind of let you use, decisions that are grounded in reality. You're using educated assumptions, Dan mentioned,
which is important.
Yeah,
it's important to have a real number.
Exactly. Yeah. We tell kind of say, hey, we're not going to give you the perfect number, but we can give you an educated assumption range. So again, you can talk about these scenarios and know, because again, at the end of the day, like Dan said, it's kind of like selling a house or whatever somebody offers it to you. That is going to be the market price. But if that's within your range, then it's a lot easier to make that decision.
I heard one person say one time that everything is for sale for the same price, but someone will pay for it.
That's
exactly.
right.
So,
exactly.
That's right.
I think
That's
kind of is applicable. How frequently should you do a business evaluation or business valuation?
Aaron, that's a really good question. There is no pat answer for that, because, and you're like, you just asked me and you're not going to answer it. Well, my answer is going to be the old, it depends. And again, it depends on what is the purpose of the business valuation. Like Caleb touched on some things a while ago. If you have an immediate need, pending divorce, I mean, that's a business dispute, you got to get it done now.
Right.
But if somebody is planning for the future, and they're doing some future succession planning, I'm going to say a minimum of 3 years, every 3 years. But again, that's all going to depend on, and the complexity of the valuation is also going to, for example, there's different types of valuations you can have done. Sometimes like I know in our industry, we've had business valuations done, and so you can have a very intense business valuation, and then every year you do just like updates to that original valuation.
What do I have to do to be ready? How do I prepare for a valuation?
Yeah, like Dan mentioned, it can be intensive, but the idea is, hey, you set a baseline and kind of go from there every year and stuff, or every few years too. And again, that's what we help people do and establish. So, not all the work's on you, but, as a business owner, as you're thinking about this and preparing, you want clean and organized financial statements. So hopefully, whether you're doing a business valuation or not, you're doing that already. But again, the more you can clean that up and standardize that, that's good. Reducing personal expenses that run through the business. Again, that's hard as a small business owner, sole proprietor. Again, there are crossover expenses that are personal and business. But again, from a valuation selling to somebody else, how do you reduce those or eliminate those? Document processes and customer relationships. That's a big one. Whoever's buying your business, they're buying the income and all that, but they want to know and hopefully run it exactly like you did of why it made it successful. So you need those things documented. And there's tools, now to use that. There's AI tools and stuff too that can help small businesses actually do some of these documentation and stuff like that too. Consider management succession. Showing the business isn't dependent on one person increases value.